Welcome to another episode of Distory with Kate and Kirk. My name is Kirk from walruscarp.com, and today we will be diving into Track B. So we're going on the flip side of the Walt Disney World edition of this attraction. And with me to explore the double trouble of Track B is Kate, the Disney Cicerone. Kate, how you feeling today?
I'm doing really good. I think this is going to be a really interesting episode because I found some really fascinating stories, not only with Disney history, but also with some of the things that we see in these scenes. And we also had some Distory listeners that threw in some of their input and knowledge and whatnot as well. So I think it's going to be a great episode. I cannot wait to dig in.
I'm ready to dig. Let's do it.
That was like dramatic pause. Okay. We have completed all of Track A. And so now we're going to go over to Track B. So this is the layout from the 1971 diagram of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride in Walt Disney World. And you can see that we're going to head to Track B, which is the blue one there on the right side. And we are going to start back at the beginning. So we're going to load on into our Toad cars and head on into Toad Hall first. Kirk, do you want to take us through there on the video?
Let's do it. All right, so again, Toad Crest. We see the fireplace. We also see some paintings on the wall. Lots of turns here. We see Moley. We see a statue. Again, more paintings. And then we are going to clip out of this as we go through the fireplace. Stop.
Before we go into this first room of Toad Hall, I just wanted to show a few things. We got some great pictures from our Distory listener, Jason, who sent in some things of this like tableau that we have. We've already talked about this a whole lot when we did Track A, so I'm not going to go into detail about this. But he did send these really fun pictures of what these look like once they went out of the attraction. And I love that this is like McBadger and Ratty just kind of like chilling next to like a restroom. Like they're just like maybe backstage somewhere or waiting for sale in some warehouse. So that's just where these things end up.
I like that old Philips TV. Does everybody remember when they had the yellow, white, and red audiovisual cables on the front because it was so much easier to plug in from the front? It looked ridiculous. You'd have all those just stuck in there. Also, it looks like there's a screening tonight of Pirates of the Caribbean. This looks like it's almost in a prop or like old. I don't know. It reminds me of the Lakeland Antiques Mall.
Yeah.
Like where they would have all old artifacts and things and just would be randomly selling a hodgepodge of items. There's so much storage in this room.
There's like a little Donald and a car behind him and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we have that one. There's also this one of Winky, just to show you what he looks like once they got removed from the attraction. And we'll talk about a few more things here as we go into Toad Hall that where they ended up after the attraction was closed. But heading into Toad Hall here, we're going and something we didn't really talk about last time we were in Toad Hall was these banners that are hanging from the ceiling. And they did have these, remember, in Disneyland's 1983 version, had banners hanging from the ceiling. And they're not like a lot of specific designs. There is a lion that kind of denotes royalty, like the royal family. But honestly, Kirk, I looked at these and I was like, these look like I could have colored them in with some markers. Because like the style of them.
Yeah, it almost, especially on the solid colored portions, they almost look like watercolor because the saturation isn't complete. It almost has like a texture to it, or it just doesn't have a uniform color throughout the entire part.
I mean, I think that's stylistically what we see throughout the attraction with these paintings that look almost like hastily done too. I think it really was the style they were going for, but it's weird.
Yeah.
From Disney, it's definitely different. But anyway, somebody who had a wealthy house would, of course, have these kind of banners and whatnot hanging from the ceiling. So this is just scene setting for Toad Hall, showing that he's an old estate. We've already talked about Moley on the chair and his animation and whatnot, so we won't go over that again. You remember how we talked about the stained glass that's on the side and the Latin that was on it? And I said I was going to do my homework. So I did go and do my homework for that. And it's on both the right and left sides of Mr. Toad. And so I had to like cobble it together from multiple videos. So it says Semper Veritas, which means always the truth or everlasting truth, which is interesting because it's not what it says in Disneyland, right? With Toady Acceleratio. It's like it's like a fun pun in Disneyland, and this one is more like what it would actually be in like a house, right?
Yeah, like that should be absurda.
Right, exactly. But it's not. It's Veritas, which is truth. So
yeah,
that's what
that's
it
like
is.
That's like a real crest
legit.
would actually say.
Toad is legit in the Walt Disney World version.
I don't want realism. I demand absurdity from all amphibious toads.
Sorry to disappoint. You have to go to Disneyland for that.
Yeah, well, I got to go to Disneyland to actually enjoy the ride anyway, so.
I know, it's true.
So I still lose.
Anyway, there's also a chair that's in a corner that's almost identical to the one that was on the other side, so I'm not going to bother going over that again. But do you want to talk about paintings a little bit?
Sure, I can talk about paintings. So when I look at these, I immediately try to find representations of similar artworks. I didn't find anything that's identical, but there's a lot of impressionistic art that looks like the toad drawing on the left-hand side. Did you find an actual photo that was really similar? I just found lots of faces that were impressionistic of the time.
If you're talking about the one on the left, that's like a cubist one. So
yeah, right.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, do you mind if I talk about the one on the right first and then go to the left? Just because of my
right is always
wrong.
Left. No,
right is always wrong.
Left is yeah, it's not correct. All right, go ahead. Yeah, talk about a little toad on a horse.
Okay, so the one that is on the right is actually really, really hard to make out. There's only kind of a few good pictures. The one that I just showed was one. This is one that our Distory listener, Bree, who's an art history enthusiast, she actually helped me out finding this particular one, which is also not great. And then this one was the best I could get as a screen grab from another video, which does kind of show Mr. Toad on a horse that has 3 wheels underneath it. And so Bree actually pointed out that this is a painting that's by Claude Monet from 1872. This is Jean Monnet on his horse tricycle. And I got a little description from the Met of it. It's Monet painted this picture of his elder son, Jean, in the summer of 1872, not long after the artist and his family returned to France from the self-imposed exile during the Franco-Prussian War. Thanks to the efforts of the dealer Paul Durand-Ruel, the painter's finances had begun to improve, enabling the once impoverished Monets to rent a house in an agreeable suburb northwest of Paris. For this portrait, Monet posed the 5-year-old Jean in the garden of their new home. Monet never exhibited the painting but kept it throughout his life. So this is kind of like a family portrait he did of his son, which I think is really fun. But then that is
really fun.
Yeah, and then they turned it into Toad. So now you can see, having seen this and then going back to that one, you can kind of see the similarities there of Toad riding on this horse tricycle.
Yeah, they definitely look alike.
Yeah. So the other ones that we saw in this other corner, before we get to the cubist one that you were talking about, there's also the Blue Boy, which is something we also saw in the Disneyland one in the 1983 version, which is from 1770. It's an oil portrait by Thomas Gainsborough. And this is a reminder of what that looked like. And then also here's what it looks like in the Disneyland version, which is quite more detailed than the Disney World version. Definitely a different...
We're building a whole park, Kate. Give us a break.
It's fair. It's fair. Okay.
No, but it does look... I will admit this for the record. After researching this, Disneyland's, after the 83 refurb, is unequivocally better than Walt Disney World's ever was. Our 2 tracks combined, even if you ran through both tracks, it would not be as good as the Disneyland version.
No, I think the 1983 Disneyland version is superior to all previous versions. Absolutely. I agree.
Agreed.
Anyway, so there's the Blue Boy, and then we get to this kind of cubist one. So my initial idea was this has to be like some sort of Picasso, right? It looks like the distorted face with the eyes that are all weird. Our other kind of Distory listener who's an art history enthusiast, Mugi, said, what I find to be interesting about the inclusion of cubism in this ride, particularly that particular style and color choices of cubism, is that it would be pretty anachronistic, as Picasso's early cubism would just make it in 1907. Now, this ride is placed in 1903. So 1907 doesn't really make sense that, he's like, they're barely getting into cubism at this point. So including this portrait here isn't really time period appropriate for the ride. But it would make sense for them to throw in something that people would just remember that visual economy thing that we talk about with Mr. Toad, that people are going to see this in a split second. You saw in the video how fast we went by it. So having something that was instantly recognizable by a lot of people, as Picasso would be, very instantly recognizable, easily recognizable.
Yeah.
I think that's why they included it here. I looked up a little bit about Cubism in general. It was created principally by the artists Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque in Paris between 1907 and 1914. The Cubist style emphasized the flat, two-dimensional surface of the picture plane, rejecting the traditional techniques of perspective, foreshortening, modeling, and chiaroscuro, and refuting time-honored theories that art should imitate nature. What? What are you laughing at me?
I'm not laughing at you. You're doing fantastic. I just got, the live stream just got to the point where I could actually see him up close. He looks ridiculous.
He does. Yeah, he's got like a collar that's distorted. So like one side of his collar is like super large and one's tiny. And then he has one eye that's like sideways and one that's vertical.
He is twisted in the best way possible.
Yeah, it's actually really fun painting. So Cubist painters were not bound to copying form, texture, color, and space. Instead, they presented a new reality in paintings that depicted radically fragmented objects, which is what we're seeing here with Mr. Toad. I did see that the word Cubism also came from remarks that were made by a critic, Louis Vassel, who derisively described Braque's 1908 work Houses at L'Estaque as being composed of cubes, which is what you're seeing here, which does look like it has a lot of cubes and trees is kind of what you're seeing. But this is a Picasso that's fairly famous. That you can see the style here of the eyes kind of being wonky and like the face, it looks like it's not profile. It's kind of like flat, like everything is all distorted. So I could not find an actual painting though that looked like this. And so our Distory listener, Mugi, she did point out that she first went to Paul Klee as maybe an influence for this particular portrait. Because if you see here next to Mr. Toad, there is a vase full of flowers. Well, I don't know, I'll say full. There's like 4 flowers in it. There's a little blue and white vase with 4 flowers that are kind of sad. But Paul Klee did some paintings with flowers and vases, which you can see here, which actually I would agree that looks like it could be an influence for that. And that would be around the same time period there. So thank you, Mugi, for contributing that, because that's definitely a possibility. One last thing about the paintings that I have is that our Distory listener, Jason, who sent in so many wonderful photos, said that at one point the Toad paintings were still on Walt Disney World property, specifically in Fantasyland, to a place where guests could actually like see them. But when he went in 2022, he went to see if he could find them at the site where they said they could see him, and he couldn't find them anywhere. So like they had been moved by that point, but they are likely in a cast member area backstage, which is what we get this picture from, which is actually quite hilarious. So this is the Laughing Cavalier by Dutch Golden Age painter Frans Hals. But this is Mr. Toad, of course, as him. So this is taken from the ride, from this Toad Hall, and is now, I don't know if it's still here, but as of when they got this photo, it's sitting on the back of a couch in clearly like an office backstage. And Kirk, the best thing about this picture is what's hanging, like, just kind of draped around the frame is like their little skeleton lights.
Skeletons, yeah.
So like somebody decorated for Halloween and they just like hung it around this like prop from this attraction. So this one is also backstage somewhere. You can see that there's like a green chair below. It definitely looks like either that chair is just super old or this was like the 90s, because that chair looks pretty old to me. But this is the painting that we saw in the trophy room of this attraction. And you can see it just chilling backstage in an office and a storage space somewhere.
God, what I would do to get that photo.
I know, right?
That photo, because it's like, it's Jungle Cruise, SEA meets Toad, Walt Disney World history. That's sitting somewhere doing nothing right now.
Collecting dust. Oh, and here's another one that is in storage somewhere. So this is Toad, Mr. Toad's Beefeater. So remember, we had that picture that wasn't very good last time. So now we have this better photo of it that I just want to share with you guys. I think that's all of the paintings. So then on the fireplace here, we see there is a toad crest on the mantle. There's also these toad, I think they're called andirons. I forgot to look it up. But the things that are like, they hold the wood in place, the logs in place in the fire, I think is what they're supposed to be doing. So they don't roll out. I think that's what their cause is. I should have looked this up and I'm sorry that I didn't. But they have like Mr. Toad faces on the top of them. And I do have a picture of what they look like. Here's up close. You can see that the fire is not the same as it is in Disneyland, where it has like, you know, actual lit kind of like glowing embers. This is, of course, before the 1983 version of Disneyland. And it's just got painted logs that look like they're glowing on this wall that you're going to crash through. But the Mr. Toad, I think I'm going to call them andirons, and they might not be correct, but they're
No, that is correct. Andirons are decorative metal supports that hold logs above a hearth, often paired with or used instead of a grate.
Thank you.
You are correct. Andirons.
I pulled that out of nowhere. So good job, brain.
Dude, I had to look up what anachronistic was, because I'm like, dude, that's a $10 word.
That's a big word.
Refers to something that belongs in a different time period than the one depicted. I feel like that's my biggest gripe with most attractions is anachronistic issues.
Yeah, like the dartboard in the Disneyland and the glasses, the mugs. I know. I don't think you going on the
lose my mind.
Pub.
Let's move along.
Anyway, so here's the andirons, and I also did find them when they went up for auction. Here's what they look like here, which is kind of fun to see them in a different context. So as you're going to crash through this fireplace, it kind of reminds me of what we got in the 1983 version, which of course was after this one. You do crash through the fireplace, although you don't go into the next scene. So they pulled that forward into the Disneyland version. And but the fireplace itself was in the very first version of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, as you can see here in the 1955 version. And it does have a toad crest above it as well, just not on the mantle. So they pulled some ideas from this original version of Mr. Toad that was in Disneyland and put it in the 1971 version. And then that inspired Disneyland's 1983 version. And everything borrows from each other. And there you go.
Stealing, dude. Thievery.
From each other. Sure. Yeah. So anyway.
Inspired by.
I think it's time for us to move on to the library. And you can see here, we kind of go back and forth in Toad Hall for a little bit. And then we crash through the fireplace. And then we head into the library. So Kirk, do you want to take us in there on the video?
Let's do it. So now we're about to smack through. We can see a grandfather clock, lots of books in the library. We see McBadger. We see a globe. We see a coat of arms that lunges forward towards us. Again, more bookcases, and we slam through a bookcase into the blackout section.
So one of the very first things you see as you go into this room is actually a grandfather clock. And it has, of course, Toad's face on it, as everything does in Toad Hall. For the face of the clock, you see a face of Mr. Toad, and like the time, what is it? The hands of the clock are coming out of his nose. And the time on the clock is 12:10, but I don't know if it actually kept time and moved. Did you notice that if it changed, it doesn't look like it changed from the prop? All the pictures.
No, because what's confusing about it is that everything's painted, right? So like if you look, it's very obvious that the metronome part of the grandfather clock on the bottom, that is straight up just paint. So I imagine the top is also just paint.
Yeah.
Even though there is a tad bit of, because it's not directly on the wall. So this is a flat, but it's a flat that is affixed to the wall. So it does have shape.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like a 3D flat.
You can't say that, dude. But yes, you're right. It's got a little bit of shape to it.
Yeah. This time says 12:10, but the clock in Town Square said 9:22. And so I don't really know if there's any rhyme or reason behind why they picked those times. I can't think of any reason why. I mean, even like time-wise, you go almost instantly from here to Town Square within like a minute. So it doesn't make sense why you time travel.
maybe you have to, set the clocks ahead because Toad's always late. So if he's going to be late, do you know what I mean?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know if there's a reason or they're just like, let's just make it this time. And that sounds great.
Yeah.
Remember, we did see a grandfather clock in the 1983 version in the library of Toad Hall for Disneyland. So this is what that looked like. Really great picture from Jason here, showing what that one looked like. But this one had some foreshadowing of what was to come later with Lady Justice and all those things and the face of the judge on the top. And this clock that we're seeing in this scene doesn't have any of that. It's just more scene setting for Toad Hall. So I don't have a great picture of this because footage is so hard to come by in this and it doesn't show it very well. But in front of the grandfather clock, there is actually a globe that is sitting on the floor. And this is, believe it or not, the best photo that I could get of this, which is, it's obviously a globe, right? That's what we got. So I did just look up a little bit about globes. Libraries of discerning gentlemen scholars often featured globes, both terrestrial and celestial. Terrestrial and celestial, yes, as teaching aids and symbols of knowledge. So this is reflected the era's fascination with exploration, astronomy and navigation, very common in this era. They also used it as teaching aids, helping illustrate geography, things we use globes for today, cartography and the vastness of the world. But interestingly enough, I did a little bit of research, and this was actually really important, specifically in England, because as the British Empire grew, it changed, and they needed to be able to see like all the territories around the world that had the British Empire, like where it was, right? So from the 16th to the 20th centuries, the British Empire at its peak in 1920, so this is even like Mr. Toad is 1903, right? So it's still growing, included a total area of over 13,700,000 square miles. So here's what it looked like. Not quite in Toad's era. This was a little bit before it.
That's awesome.
But you can see all of the pink areas is part of the British Empire, like the territories of the British Empire, which is quite a significant portion of the world, quite honestly.
I still, it amazes me to think about how large their empire was based on the geographic size of their country.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously naval prowess and weaponry helped with that, but my goodness, dude, they owned so much.
They knew what they were doing. They got the job done. They conquered a good portion of the world. And, but then you can see over time, this is a map of like all the places they've owned over time. This is all of them. It's a lot. So, British Empire was growing at this time. Having a globe there to kind of keep tabs on what's going on in the world makes sense just for scene setting for Mr. Toad. That's all I'm getting at there.
You know what's weird about like globes and whatnot is it's not like you would get a new image for them, right?
Yeah.
Could you recover a globe?
I don't know.
Do you know what I mean? Like wouldn't you do that?
You probably just got a new one because there's like specific globes from certain years, and a lot of them, I don't know if they have the years on them. Let me go back and look if any of these have years on them, because these were ones from like the 1890s, 1880s, 1890s. Oh, it's so hard to tell, but I feel like they might have years on them. No, I don't know for sure. But now I'm assuming you just got a new globe when something changed. Like we did for remember how our like maps in our classroom said, what is it called? When Russia was the Soviet Union and it would just be that way forever because they couldn't afford to change them. Like countries that didn't exist anymore.
We had a globe at my parents' house. And I loved it because it was like one of those topography ones. Certain like mountain ranges and whatnot, you could actually like feel the texture. So as a kid, I would look and try to find the largest mountain ranges. And I feel like that started my love of wanting to search and explore mountains.
Your love of globes.
I don't really care about globes that much, but I do care about the world. Like I do think that's kind of an interesting thing because you're always curious. I don't know if you had this growing up, but I had an entire encyclopedia. Obviously, this is way before the internet and everything. And I remember just straight up opening AB, just the one column was AB. And I just go through all of AB and just they had pictures, but then there was lots of like little snippets. It was awesome, man. Encyclopedias were cool.
I
mean,
remember
now
when we got our,
everything
like,
is completely different and easier. But
well, I remember when we first got our, like, the one on, like, CD-ROM, like the encyclopedia on
that was
CD-ROM.
huge.
That was, like, was
Yeah.
Britannica or whatever.
It was Encarta, dude. It
Encarta.
was called Encarta.
Encarta. That's right.
It was called Encarta.
Wow.
Yeah, in the
It's bringing it
90s.
back.
Yep.
Oh, man.
And when it would open, it would be like this terrible GIF of like a butterfly. It'd be like, and like a telescope, like, and like a globe barely spinning.
Yeah.
Encarta, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Bringing it back. Okay. Anyway, back to Mr. Toad. Do you have things you want to share about any of those things before we move on? I have like McBadger next.
No, I tried to find any of the pictures with books. None of our bindings have any kind of legible. Do you have
a
just
picture
failed
up,
miserably.
No.
Well, I mean, we can look at. Here, I'll pull something up real quick. Like any of them, and I know we didn't talk about this necessarily, but every single picture of the books are just, there's nothing. It's symbols. It's like nondescript lettering. It's ornate, but it's not distinct.
Yeah, I don't see anything that's really descript. Especially, you would think even the ones on his desk for McBadger would have something.
None.
But none.
Nothing. Not one. And that was like such a fun part of Disneyland.
Mm-hmm.
Like going through those titles was so fun. I feel, again, I can only assume, based on all of the paintings and everything that we've done, that this was on a severe budget and time constraint, and it needed to just get accomplished because the rest of the park had to get done as well.
Yeah, I think budget was a huge one too, especially because of Roy being in charge, and he was more of a stickler for budget than Walt was. And I don't want to say that, like, there was a lot of really beautiful things that were made in the Magic Kingdom, and a lot of their money went towards like utilidors and like creating lakes and stuff. Like the infrastructure was where a lot of their money went towards. The monorail tracks were very expensive, and so you have to think about all of that. Is like that's where a lot of the money went. Versus when they built Disneyland, they did a lot of things that were decorative, things that you could see to make it beautiful, to make it ornate. And they just didn't have as much money for those things because they had to build so much infrastructure, I think. That's my...
Yeah, and I mean, we get lots of enhancements moving on, and plussing becomes a large part of the culture at Disney World. Yeah. But I agree. I think your sentiment is spot on.
Yeah, and they, of course, then also inherited things from Disneyland that were decorative, like the benches that I love that are in Fantasyland. Those are all Disneyland Fantasyland.
There's so many benches we have.
Yeah.
My gosh, there's like 4.
There's some in Liberty Square too. Those, they painted them white there, but
yeah, those are right by the Christmas shop.
Yeah, those are all Disneyland Fantasyland benches that they inherited. Anyway, let's move on. Let's go to McBadger. He's sitting here at this desk, and he actually is animated, so he pops up almost like he's standing up, like you're running to his desk. He goes, "Oh!" Like, and he's holding a book that says Ledger on it. It's like the one book that has a word on it.
I'm pretty sure he's disturbed by us.
Yeah, he's not happy. He was working on his ledger, which of course the ledger is where you keep accounts of the finances for the estate. So I actually did a little bit of research into quills because he has some quills sitting in front of him. If you don't mind us going on a mini rabbit trail,
please.
So if you look at the quills that are in these 2 ink pots that are sitting in front of him, in this one he actually has no quills, which I wonder if guests maybe reached out and stole these, honestly, knowing how they like to take things, and these would be really easy to snag.
It's like the Snow White apples all over again.
Exactly. So I wonder, because there was no quills in here. Now there's a red and a black, which I think is for like revenue and expenses, probably as he's doing his ledger. And then oh, sorry, I have to go forward. And then this one, you see there's actually 2 white feathers in this one. So it changes. And I just wanted to mention also that McBadger does have a desk that I'm assuming is probably also a ledger book in Disneyland's, which we didn't have that context before when we did Disneyland for the 1983 version in the library. He has a desk that you kind of run into. It's probably a ledger book because I think they borrowed it from this 1971 version in Walt Disney World. And of course, McBadger's
that would make sense.
Yeah, but he's up on the he's up on the ladder in the seat instead of at the desk. Even the chair is somewhat similar to the one that is in the Disneyland version. In terms, it's like ornate and kind of like oval shaped on the top.
Fancy pants.
Fancy, yeah.
Put that under expense, dude. Put that in red. That chair was pricey.
This is my chair. Yep. It's going to
That was a big thing in the office, man. Pam wanted new chairs.
It's right.
Somebody wanted a new copier machine. Big deal.
Which one would you have picked? New copier or new chairs?
I would have picked new copier. The chairs are fine. You need a copier to actually function in the way that they did the office. New chairs were, I get you want to be comfortable, but nah, not worth it.
Yeah. Well, it is saying something though. She is the one that had to make the copies all day and she wanted the chairs. So that's saying something. Mm-hmm. That chair must be really bad. Sorry, sidetracked. Let's talk about quills a little bit. Quills evolved from the first pen, which were called reed pens, which were created by the ancient Egyptians in 3200 BC, and they were made out of bamboo or reeds. They could be dipped into ink and used on papyrus, which brings me back to Spaceship Earth.
Spaceship Earth.
Yeah, like pounding the papyrus. Quills in particular were made from large flight feathers of different birds. The best ones were made from goose, swan, and turkey feathers. And this was actually kind of interesting, Kirk, because if you're left-handed, you would get your feather from the right wing of the bird because of the way that it curved. And it's vice versa. So if you were right-handed, you would get it from the left and left on the right. And yeah, so because of the curve of the feather. The point of the feather is treated so it can be used for writing. It's soaked and then cured in hot sand. And then the hollow shaft is kind of like cut. But I did actually watch somebody make some of these with a pen knife, which was really fascinating to learn that. The hollow shaft of the feather holds the ink. The ink flows to the tip by capillary action, which is spontaneous movement of a liquid, often against gravity. You need to form a nib, though, at the bottom of the feather, which means you need to make this cut that is a diagonal cut or sideways cut. If you see on, what is that, my Roman numeral 6, the number 6 there, you can see that line, or even on number 5, you can see the line that they have to cut. If you don't have that, it won't hold your ink and it'll spill all over the place. So it's really critical that you have that particular cut. You also,
it's like a nucleation point almost. It's crazy.
Yeah. So you also needed to write on an angled surface, which also reminded me of Epcot's Spaceship Earth, because you think of that monk who's
homeboy's sleeping.
Yeah, he's sleeping and it's propped up, right? Because otherwise it's gravity is working for you in that way. Otherwise you're getting big splotches of ink, because the way that you would write is not actually you wouldn't write like we write, up and down and whatnot. You actually have to kind of write so that it's almost like all your strokes are going down in a way. Because of the way that the ink flows out of it. So the
ink would flow too fast. I feel like if you had your quill directly straight up, it would just flow right out. Where if it's like this, it's monitoring the flow rate.
Yeah, exactly. So interestingly,
what are we doing here, dude? What is this?
Well,
no, this is cool. I like it.
Interestingly enough, the fountain pen was patented around the mid-1800s, which held the ink inside the pen, allowing for a steady flow of ink when pressed upon the paper, instead of needing to require a pot of ink for dipping. So you think of Mr. Toad as 1904. Okay, so look at this. Not only the fountain pen, but the ballpoint pen was introduced in 1888. So that's a little tiny ball inside a rolling ball at the tip of the pen, helped prevent the ink from drying out and also distributed the ink evenly on the page. This allowed the pen to be more durable and increase its longevity. Also a lot less messy than these earlier versions. So this pen, there's no reason for McBadger. The reason we're talking about this is because there's no reason for McBadger to be using quills in this, because
anachronistic
word of the day here on Distory is it's indeed anachronistic, because maybe he's just really old school and he just really likes using some very old school methods.
The only way I can think about it is maybe he has access to quills just because of feathers and animals, but it still is, again, I think it's just a misstep.
Yeah. Maybe they're just thinking because it's an old estate and they would do things the old way, or I don't know, or they're just it's more fun to have quills there, than just a pen. But I don't know. I'm just they should have had, they would have pens by then. You wouldn't be scratching along with a quill pen. That's crazy. So
yeah, it makes no sense. Fountain pen that's the right thing. It's visually more interesting to have those quills though.
It is. It definitely is, for sure. Should we talk about the suit of armor that's in the corner?
Sure.
there is this suit of armor in the corner that tilts over like it's going to fall on you, which is, again, an effect they pulled forward into Disneyland's 1983 version. Of course, we know him as Sir Clinks-a-Lot, and we know that because in Disneyland, it has his name at the bottom that says Sir Clinks-a-Lot, which I think is such a fun detail. I looked really hard at this, Kirk. I could not see anything that said Sir Clinks-a-Lot or any sort of name.
There's no nameplate. Yeah.
No. So he's not Sir Clinks-a-Lot. But he does have a red plume feather in his helmet. And Kirk, I went down the best rabbit hole about this feather. Okay.
Okay.
I know you like suits of armor because you talked about it last time, but I'm going to talk about this. So having a red feather or plume in a helmet or suit of armor signified like status, wealth, maybe was your family colors, was often used in tournaments as a way to identify oneself or one's unit in battle. So it could be ways to identify yourself, probably less in battle, more in tournaments. It could also be used to distract your opponent because if you have feathers like bouncing around on your head while you're like, what is it? Parrying? What is it called?
Parrying.
Parrying.
Parrying. Yes.
Parrying. I was like, there's a word there. It would definitely distract them, right? But these plumes were known as panaches. Okay. If you know panache, panache is another word of the day here for Distory. So panache means like, somebody who has a stylish or confident manner, like he has a lot of panache, like it's like
peacocking in a way.
Yes, exactly. So why we have the word panache originates from the Middle French word panache, meaning plume of feathers. Okay, now wait, it gets better, because if you're looking at this right here, in the 16th century, tournament panaches on your helmet could get quite fancy, like this one we're seeing here that has like a peacock on the front and then these wild feathers that all like climb up in this massive array. Think of like 17th century like Louis Couture's like hairstyles that were like feet tall, right? That's what we're talking about here. It's attached to the helmet. It's a whole bunch of feathers in this like decorative style attached to the helmet. This was a real thing that happened that were called panaches. So this is just some info from the Art Institute of Chicago. These pictures are the best because these are two soldiers. They're looking like they have jousting poles maybe, and they have these massive plumes of feathers coming out of their helmets that have different colors. And this is actually based on some actual artwork that they found from the time that was basically that the nobility was approving their style of their panache for their helmet. So some of these helmets that have holes in them, they weren't just like for breathing necessarily, they were in the front, but the ones in the back were like to attach the panaches to these giant feathers. So they could be up to 2 to 4 feet tall, and they were a display of wealth, like theater, opera. It was meant to be a spectacle, right? It was supposed to be like, think of like big hats during the Kentucky Derby. That's kind of what we're talking about here, right? Except the people like jousted and whatnot. But they only used them usually for one tournament, and that was it. So it was like a one-shot deal. And so I just thought that this was fascinating because you can see, we always see these like suits of armor, but we rarely see them with these giant feathers on top.
Yeah, but all right. So were these for like skilled tournaments that were not as violent? They were probably brutal, but do you know what I mean?
No, it was like
in terms of like
the tournament. Yeah.
Right. It would be like more of a traditional game of skill versus like an actual combative style.
Yeah, it was for the tournaments that you go and you would have spectators that are eating treats in the stands, and they're, I think in like Knight's Tale, which is so
Dude,
not
I'm
accurate.
so mad that medieval times does not have panaches. What are they doing?
Right? They need to visit.
What are they doing?
Art Institute of Chicago and have a gander at these.
This is so cool, by the way. This is one of my favorites. I had no idea about panaches.
So that's kind of where I think this comes from, full circle back with this particular guy who's got a feather coming out of his head. It's just kind of a simple panache, although I'm kind of disappointed that it's not fancier.
Poor dude. Poor. And I'm kind of bummed out that color-wise, it's not like more like Toad color scheme. It's just kind of it's like a pinkish red.
Yeah, maroonish feather.
Yeah.
It's kind of lame, but
that peacock one is wild though. Could you imagine seeing that? You'd be like, gosh, dang, that is cool.
Yeah. So
yeah, that is neat.
Panache. So the word panache comes from these things that people used to wear on their heads. Go figure. Mm-hmm. And so that's why you have a lot of style and a lot of panache.
Yeah.
There you are. I did want to say that there is another suit of armor that is actually in the other corner, because I looked at a backwards video of this particular track and I couldn't get a great picture of it. Like, it's like a blur. So if we're looking at this one here, the corner that is to the right actually has a second suit of armor. So it's not just one, there's two in this room that do. I think the other one leans towards you as well. And that would go back to 1955 when they had two little toad suits of armor next to each other. So that would make sense that they would have two here.
One thing with the suit of armor that's to note is that on the bottom, you can actually see the undergarment, which is like a leather, which, remember, we had talked about before with coat of arms, how they could have different fabrics or leather in this case, because for mobility, but also for comfort of wearing a giant suit like that. The other thing I have is right behind it are some curtains.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to talk about curtains for a second?
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed. It's not as cool as you, but I had to just... Anyway.
Let's talk curtains. Sure.
The first known use of curtains was in ancient Egypt, where animal hides or woven reed mats were hung over doorways for privacy, light control, and dust protection. Ancient Rome and Greece, the wealthier households would use fabric curtains made from wool or linen suspended over windows or doorways. These were often plain yet functional. Then in the Middle Ages, we saw lots more curtains being used, especially for canopy beds, insulation, privacy, but also bed bugs. Tapestries, heavy drapes for decorations, and ways to block drafts in stone buildings became common. And then, of course, for a manor like this, you would probably have in between the brickwork lots of drafts. So these are big, heavy red curtain fabric to help that. Now, culturally, this is significant for the red because it's associated with romance, desire, intensity, and stimulating energy.
What's happening in that library?
Bro. I just think it's because of like his like strong passions, you know, not necessarily romantic. But, you know, hey, he's got some panache, so who knows?
Anything goes in Toad Hall.
Froggy fever.
Wow. Well, that's interesting. I don't even know if I noticed the curtains because I was so taken in by the panache on the soldier.
I love it.
Before we head into the next scene, I think we need to pause for just a quick second and talk about a few of the things we've got going on at Walrus Carp and Disney Cicerone. So, Kirk, what do you have going on over there?
Yeah, so new shirt design. We have our Winnie the Pooh, as Winnie the Pooh is now a part of the public domain. So we have a Honey Buns little Pooh sticking out of a stump. So, and then also for right now, we just launched some our second in our animatronics series. We've got a new Croc Charm, which happens to be this little guy, our little Sunny Eclipse with his little tiny feet. So you can get all of that and more free shipping over at walruscarp.com. What do you got going on, Kate?
I just want to say, I was just reading a story from Kevin Rafferty about Sunny Eclipse because he was the one that wrote all of his songs. And
that's so fun.
I'll have to send you some more of the information because it's really funny. But he's just like, I don't really know how I got this project approved because it was such a crazy thing that was like so unnecessary.
Yeah.
He's like, and they let me like write all these crazy like love songs in like a lounge singer style, but it happened and it's there.
They're great. They are so fun. I love Space Angels is like one of the greatest.
Well, he talks a lot about the lyrics in there, so I'll send you that. But that's in his, I want to say it's Magical Journeys. I never remember the name of his book, but it's Kevin Rafferty's book. He was an Imagineer. It's a great one if you just need a really good, funny read. Don't read it on an airplane like me. I totally annoyed my neighbor by laughing out loud every 10 seconds. Over at Disney Cicerone, I have something really exciting happening. I'm actually launching a new book this month. You guys have heard me talk about it for a little while here on Distory. So you guys are the very first ones to see the cover of this book, which is A Glimmer of Pixie Dust, Finding Our Hope in the Disney Story. It's the second book in a series, which I haven't named yet, so that'll be a surprise for when that comes out because I'm still figuring that out. But it's a collection of curated writings about how we experience the Disney parks and movies, also integrating obscure Disney history and stories of the Imagineers and animators. It is so the first book in the series is a glimpse of the magic, finding ourselves in the Disney story. And so the first one is a little bit more like magic and wonder. This one here with a glimmer of pixie dust is a little bit more focused on hope. And there will be a third book at least in this series as well, which I am currently writing. But this book should be coming out in a few weeks. I don't have an exact date yet, but sometime here in April. You can look for it on Amazon.com, which is also where all of the rest of my books are as well.
Love it.
Yeah.
That's a great looking cover, Kate.
Thank you. So my good friend, David Cowan, is a wonderful photographer. He has an account on Instagram called Diz Cartel. And he actually took that beautiful picture of the castle with Walt and Mickey. And so he's like, hey, do you want to use any of these photos? I was like, sure, that sounds great. Thank you. So it was a nice collaboration with a good friend of mine who actually was the officiant at my wedding with Elliot. So it all comes full circle in the end. Yeah. Are we ready to move on to the next scene?
Let's do it.
Okay. So let's head into the next scene, which you can see as we've been through Toad Hall. We went into the library. We did kind of a U-turn around the library here. And then we're going into a blackout, which we don't really have much to show you there because it's just a blackout. It's just dark. So we're going to go through the barnyard and then we're going to go around the corner into another kind of very, very short scene called Barn in this layout. So Kirk, do you want to take us through there on the video?
Yep. Let's start with our knight and his panache as he's looming towards us. We go through a bookcase into the blackout so you can't see anything. We notice a ram. There is also lots of hay. There's a pig. Again, more bales of hay, very, very tall, as we see a cow and a bull, a fence and a countryside. We see a farmer and a rope into a barn, which has a chicken coop, and there are chickens squawking about all over the place. And then we head on out the back.
So before we go into much about the details of the scene, I just want to bring us back to this concept in case you weren't with us in the very beginning of the series, which was a while ago now. This is a Bruce Bushman concept. Before we had Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, we had something called Motor Mania by Bruce Bushman. And it's similar in concept. You can see it's kind of a wild ride through all these different spaces. But the one I want to focus on, right in the center there is actually a haystack that you go through that has like a girl screams is what it says on it. And then you also have a cow that you would bump into or almost bump into. So I think that's where they pulled this idea for this scene from, was from this original concept art. And it didn't make it into the Disneyland version at all. It just made it kind of hop, skipped, and jumped over to Florida. And that's where we had this scene show up. Remember how we talked about how the girl screams in the haystack before? And we were like, what is that about?
Yeah.
Well, I was kind of like researching haystacks just a little bit because see if there's anything there to talk about, and there's really not. It's basically that haystacks were either play places for children or used for romantic rendezvous. That's so.
Ew.
People who are
in the hay. I remember like there was a saying like a romp in the hay, but what is wrong with people?
Roll in the hay. I want to say it's probably leaning more towards like a girl who was playing, a small child who was playing in it and was startled by a car driving through the center. Moving on. One of the first things we see here is this, you call it a ram, which is more accurate than I said. I thought it was a sheep. So you're right. It's got big horns on it. So probably a ram. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
No, I don't. Now you have me in a haystack. I got hay fever, dude. I'm all over the place now.
Right behind the sheep or the ram is a giant haystack. And so that's why we're talking about haystacks here. You do hear a few things at this point too. You hear a rooster crowing and a horse neighing. When you see this ram, you actually hear a horse neighing, which is maybe the horse is invisible because I didn't see a horse in this scene at all. It's just place setting. And then right next to the ram, right behind him is this little pig, which you can see here. He's kind of got like he's like up on his two back hooves. And the other two are kind of waving about dramatically as you've almost run him over. And it looks like he's like standing in like a mud wallow because you can see some lines where the mud is kind of like almost like ripples.
They love it, dude.
Yeah. So
happy as a pig in mud.
Yeah. And I love that they have like hay painted on the floor from the haystack as well as like an actual like 3D hay stack that has hay on it.
You would think it would spill out. Can I talk about the pig?
You sure can.
Did you know that most pigs naturally have curly tails, Kate?
So I didn't know that. I know that Homer Simpson likes to go curly straight, curly straight.
Curly straight. Actually, it was weird. This morning on my TikTok feed, there was a woman at a farm who was straightening all the tails, and it was very uncomfortable to look at because you're so used to the curly tail. But all right, it's interesting that they decided to make a curly tail for the pig because it is a sign of good health and very common in well-bred domesticated pigs like you would find here on a farm because it's domesticated. They're growing or feeding it or raising it for livestock and meat. But also because pigs are expressive, they can curl or wag their tails to show contentment. Though in this case, the pig looks quite frightened. Huh?
Like dogs?
Yeah, just like dogs. Just like dogs. Mm-hmm. It's a heritable trait. So some breeds will naturally have curly tails, but specifically wild boars do not. So these are clearly domesticated curly tail piggies. But if they had limp or drooping tails, it would be a visual indicator that the pigs are sick, stressed, or in pain.
Oh.
I kind of feel like it needs a limp, droopy tail in this case because he looks like he is definitely stressed.
It's kind of like when the orca whales are in captivity and their like dorsal fin like tips over. The same kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm laughing at a comment in our chat that says Kirk's TikTok FYP is a crazy place.
Yeah, dude, it is. It is. I never like anything, but they know from my retention time, I'm like, what is that? And then boom, it's like, I might be on Caterpillar TikTok tomorrow. You never know. Haystacks. It might be listening to me for haystacks right now.
I made the mistake of watching TikToks while I was curling my hair one day, which you should never do because you don't have any hands and you get stuck on something and then it thinks you want more of that forever. And I got stuck on like the Halara shorts that they're trying to sell. Every 3 out of 5 of my videos on my FYP are Halara shorts. So like they're really trying to sell me these shorts. Like I don't want them.
I think that's a sign you need to buy those shorts.
Maybe I think if I bought them, it would only get worse, you know? It's just going to make
probably
it worse.
Like, hey, but you don't have them in green.
So we talked about the pig.
Oh, can we talk about haystacks?
Yeah. I thought you would never ask.
So we kind of had talked about things that are similar or adjacent to this when we talked about thatch roofs, but haystacks were essential for drying and preserving feed for animal fodder. So after cutting grass or hay, it needed to dry thoroughly to prevent mold. A properly shaped haystack helped shed rain and retain airflow, keeping the inner hay dry and usable, meaning like the outer layers would typically be the ones that would get like ruined, but you would always be pulling from the inside of the haystack. What I think is interesting is because haystacks were traditionally used in farms that didn't have barns for storage, and yet we're about to go into a giant barn that has lots of wasted space that isn't being occupied. So I think that's interesting that they've elected to allow the animal feed to be outside against the weather where you're probably going to have a lot more loss. Plus, there's not that many animals in this farm. There's like 4, and they need that much hay
because it's neighing. If you don't see it, but yeah.
Okay, so then it's 5, right? We have a ram, we have a pig, and I'm not talking about the chickens yet, but ram, pig,
horse,
cow, bull, and non-visible horse.
Yeah, invisible
horse. They have so much hay for all of those things. But hay was vital for feeding cows and horses and sheep during the winter or drought when grazing wasn't possible.
I mean, it still is to this day. I mean, this is still, but they don't necessarily put it in stacks. Like I think the modern ones, they'll put them in particular shapes. Here in Oregon, we see a lot of the like rolls of hay.
Yeah, I was going to say rolls. I see lots of the rolls.
Yeah, I think it's all because of the machinery they use to do it. Instead of using a pitchfork to just like throw it into a pile, they're actually going to put in a bale or a big roll. I don't know what they're called. Maybe there are bales too, but we see that too here. Like we'll see because it rains so much in Oregon, it can get moldy really fast. So they always have to put it inside a barn or like make a structure that covers it with some like neat plastic around it or whatnot to keep it from molding.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Things you didn't think you learned about on Distory. Mold.
Moldy hay. This time on Distory, we're going to talk about moldy hay.
That's not
dude, which is also disgusting, man. That's disgusting. If you're going to roll around in moldy hay, what's wrong with y'all?
Well, maybe it was dry first. Who knows? Anyway, we ready to move on? Have we talked about hay enough?
Yes, please. Hey girl. Hey, girl.
Interestingly enough, if you look backwards while you're on this ride, you would see a better view of the mural that is actually painted on the wall, flat on the wall. There is a country house, just like we see in Disneyland's 1983 version. Remember when we went in that kind of keep out area with the farmer? We do see a house that's painted on the wall. So I think they pulled that forward into the Disneyland version as well.
I love that it's an actual cottage versus just a painting of a cottage, even though this is a painting of a cottage.
What?
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's like an actual landscape where the other one was a painting of the landscape. This is actually the landscape, but it is also the painting of the landscape.
My head hurts. What? It's fine. Let's move on. Next up, we see a scene that has a cow with a cowbell on. And it's mooing because you're bumping into it, which is, I guess, I really think this is pulled from the Bruce Bushman concept because the idea of like bumping into a cow, I think that came from there. Yeah. And then next to it is this is a really good picture of what it looked like when it was pulled out of the ride. It's utterly incredible. Yeah, it was bad.
I love her eyelashes and her mascara. She's like giving Clarabelle a run for her money.
She's got a lot of panache.
She does. Mm-hmm. Well, her tail had panache until they cut off the tip of it on this.
Wait a minute, yeah. Oh yeah, look at her tail was all like fluffy. Something happened. I wonder if it was animated. I wonder if it
maybe.
Yeah. But it's her tail's gone. Something happened there. There was a story there. Oh, here's a close-up of the cow being bumped. You can see here in the Bruce Bushman concept. And it says, cow bumped, pivots to moose. Which is kind of what happens here. Because you pivot. You go towards them and you pivot. Oh, and I also found this really great sketch, too, of a cow that was going to be in this particular attraction by Bruce Bushman. So this one looks a little bit more like the version that we got here.
Very fun.
And then next to... that is a very, very angry bull. You know what this reminds me of, Kirk, is the red like combine that comes after you in Radiator Springs Racers. He like pops up and like comes after you. Looks very similar to that. Yeah.
I want to know where he got his lips done. That's what I need to know.
You get some filler.
He's definitely double lining at least, bare minimum.
I thought that was his teeth. I love that we can't tell.
No. I think that's his lips.
Yeah, he has some eye bags going on, though. He used to have some work done up there.
But he's got nice lashes.
He does.
Nice lashes again.
Lots of lashes.
I'm getting lost in those eyes right now.
He's also snorting, too. He's making some very angry sounds. So it's supposed to be intimidating that you are running into a bull, which is not a good thing, and he's going to chase after you. That's the whole storytelling here. That's pretty much it. Do you have anything else you want to share about cows or bulls before we move on?
No, we already talked about cowbells and bull rings. We can move on.
Okay. Next, we have this wonderful farmer who's standing up on some bales of hay, which are actually bales. They're not haystacks. So somebody was baling hay back then, but not everybody. But he is on one foot and he has an animation of he's kind of like rocking back and forth like you tipped him over, made him off balance. And he has a plaid shirt and some blue overalls and a straw hat and a handlebar mustache that's white. He's yelling at you because he's not happy. And his rope is attached to a hay bale that is swinging above your head, which you can see here. That's going up into the hay loft. It looks like he's repositioning those hay bales into the hay loft. Maybe they have dried out by this point and they're going in for storage, but you are interrupting that process by going through here. And so the hay kind of swings over your head, which makes it, which honestly, Kirk, I didn't really put that 2 and 2 together to now, but that is kind of what they did in the scene with the harbor in Disneyland, right?
Yeah. Yes, 1000%.
Because they have crates that are swinging over your head instead of hay bales. So it seems like they pulled that same gag forward. They just used crates in the harbor instead of hay bales. So
for the farmer, do you notice his shirt is that like checkerboard pattern?
Yeah.
So they've been making gingham, which is durable, inexpensive fabric for a very, very long time. And it came from northern British fabric mills when it was produced, and it created that recognizable two-color pattern, and they made it in the 18th century. So this would be of the right time period.
Not anachronistic.
Not anachronistic. So in our chat, that's a really, Kenzie brings up, wasn't gingham started making flour bags out of gingham so ladies could repurpose them. So I had to just kind of pop on over.
That's interesting.
The early history of decorative feed sacks. Cloth sacks for feed started to be produced in the mid-19th century using industrial sewing machines. Later half, some were lined with linen or burlap, but eventually it looks like, gingham was used in... I found a small notebook made from the Gingham Girl Flower Company.
I wonder if that's why they also use them for curtains, because there was a lot of gingham curtains in that era. It would make sense if they were repurposing the fabric. And then, of course...
In the 1920s, manufacturers realized the potential of cloth sack decoration to promote sales by persuading the farmers' wives to purchase specific brands. One of the first to do so was George P. Plant Milling Company of St. Louis, Missouri, which started in 1925 to produce a range of brick red gingham cloth sacks under the trade name of Gingham Girl Flower due to Gingham Girl's popularity. They went on to produce Gingham Mother, Gingham Baby, Gingham Queen in different colors, and the idea was patented to prevent other cloth and manufacturer bags from producing cotton bags and other attractive designs. So yeah, I mean, in the 20s is where it kind of picked up to use them for flour sacks. And then people would reuse in clothing design. I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Thank you, Kenzie, for sharing that.
Very cool. Yeah, dude, good one. Good little rabbit trail. I like it.
At this point, we go through the barn doors here underneath the swinging hay bale, and we run into a whole bunch of chickens. It's like, I'm guessing there's a chicken coop here somewhere, but we don't actually see a chicken coop. We're just like running through these chickens. And
we hear the chickens, though.
Oh, yes. We hear them. So the chickens are not only like painted on the wall, like there's like a flat black wall, and then there's white chickens that are painted on them that are squawking around and flying. But there's also a chicken mobile up on the ceiling, which is...
Heck yeah, there is.
So here's where I went down just a little rabbit trail, and this is going to get a little bit wonky, but it includes the Haunted Mansion, so I'm sure you'll forgive me. So this reminded me so much of the Batmobile, not the Batmobile, the car, but the Batmobile that used to be in the Haunted Mansion's attic, right? That we talked about on our Haunted Mansion series a long time ago. So this Batmobile used to be in the attic, and it would swing around with these bats kind of flapping. We actually have a version of this in Big Thunder. I think is it Disneyland's Big Thunder that has it, or is it Disney World's? I can't remember if yours has it. There's one of them.
I don't think ours spins, but we do have articulation of the bats due to wind.
I think Disneyland has the actual mobile of the bats turning around. At least the last time I saw it. But anyway, so this Batmobile was actually developed by Yale Gracey, who is the illusioneer at WED, which was the early name for Imagineering. He worked alongside Rolly Crump, who we've talked about, is the designer of this ride, the lead designer for Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. He worked alongside him, and he was at WED until 1975, so he would have been around while Walt Disney World was being developed. So it wouldn't surprise me if he had something to do with this chicken mobile as well as this Batmobile that we have for the Haunted Mansion. But he also made a whole bunch of other illusions, a ton of them. This is Yale Gracey in all of his glory. This is one of my favorite pictures of him because he always had like a pipe, but he made the fire effect inside the Haunted Mansion because he said he found like a hubcap on the side of the freeway, plus like a light and a fan and some mylar that they had laying around. And he made this really cool fire effect that you see here. It really does look very, very realistic. They swapped this out in Pirates of the Caribbean later. Now it's like a white silk that they use instead of mylar. which is more like a plasticky thing, kind of like almost like a see-through tissue paper that's kind of like plasticky. He also developed the embers, the glowing embers inside Pirates of the Caribbean, which there's more of them in the Disneyland version than there is in the Disney World. But anyway, one effect that he made, Kirk, that I thought you would be really interested in is in the original Alice in Wonderland attraction. Remember how they had those like big head figures of the Tea Party of the Mad Hatter and the March Hare?
Yeah.
Well, if you look just beyond this caterpillar vehicle, you see that the Mad Hatter is pouring kind of like an eternal stream of tea. And it's like something that's like turning around and around and around. And that is something that Yale Gracey actually developed to make it look like the illusion that he was always pouring this tea. So
yeah, it's like a twisted column, but then you turn it. So because it's physically twisted, it just looks like it's always pouring straight down. But the only thing that's happening is that twist is spinning.
Anyway, I thought you'd be interested in that he specifically developed that, because I don't think we talked about that in our Alice in Wonderland series.
No, that's really cool.
He was well known for all...
That would be me in that back of the caterpillar. That's me every time I ride.
He made a whole bunch of other effects too. I won't go into every single one of them, but one of his well-known effects that he made was the Pepper's Ghost, of course, and the Haunted Mansion, which we've talked about at length. He also made the fireflies in Pirates of the Caribbean without ever having seen a real firefly in real life, which is pretty amazing. And then Exitencio wrote a headstone for him in the graveyard of the Haunted Mansion, which is referring to Yale's playful, boyish curiosity and demeanor. So it's the gravestone said, Master Gracey laid to rest, no mourning pleased at his request, farewell. Of course, now they put this in the Walt Disney World version, and it's also back in the new graveyard that they kind of made for Disneyland. It's up on the hill. It's there as well, but it has been in the graveyard since I think 1970 is when they put that graveyard in. But master, of course, here in this context does not mean master of the house. It means master like a young boy who's not old enough to be called Mister, because he was referring to his kind of boyish qualities when Exitencio wrote that about his friend. So there's a quote from Yale in this from a 1970 article in Famous Monsters in Filmland magazine after Haunted Mansion opened. And he gave an interview and he said, often I simply don't know that something couldn't be done. I would develop a concept and gather various gadgets and materials and keep trying until it worked. When we built the illusions, we were surprised to find how effective they actually were. People enjoy being frightened, but we couldn't make the attraction too scary because of the droves of children that would be coming. We decided to add the element of comedy. It's like adding a wink of an eye to the end of a ghost story. Someday I would like to design a real scare house. Some of the illusions that weren't used in the Haunted Mansion would send chills through anyone I knew. So he's talking specifically, they dulled down the Haunted Mansion so it wouldn't scare the children, which I think is fun.
Ooh, scare them. There's little wake them up.
A lot of kids are still scared by it. So,
boo.
And something that we don't talk about a lot, and I don't really like to make a lot of content about it because I don't like to talk about it. But so Yale Gracey was sadly murdered on September 3rd of 1983 at the age of 73. He and his wife Beverly were in a cabana at the Bel Air Bay Club on the beach at Pacific Palisades when a robber broke in at 2:30 a.m. and shot Yale and wounded his wife, and Yale didn't survive. So it was kind of a senseless murder, and really, really sad, really massive loss for anybody who knew Yale. Had only good things to say about him. And I have a quote from Mark Davis. He said, "He was a great guy. Alice and I never drank a Manhattan without saying, 'Here's to Yale,' because that's all he would drink. He made an enormous contribution to the Disney attractions. It was a great loss." So the next time you want to honor Yale Gracey, have a Manhattan, give him a toast, and say, "Here's to Yale." So that's just a little side trick, because as soon as I saw that mobile, I'm like, oh, that's so much like Yale Gracey. And we don't talk about him too much outside of Haunted Mansion, but he did contribute so much to so many effects and different attractions that I think it's worth it to just have a little tribute to him in this particular one. At this point, Kirk, I feel like that might be a good place to roll to a stop for now. What do you think?
Not yet.
Not yet? You got something more? We gonna talk about chickens?
We got to talk about chickens, girl. You know me all too well. chicken talk. So you know me, I like to make sure that we know all the breeds of all the animals and things that we're studying here. And my problem with this whole entire scene is that no farmer would ever have this many of that style of chicken.
Okay, hold on. Before we go forward, you've chosen a picture with chickens in front of a massive British flag.
Yes, thank you. It's a great picture that really proves the top 3 traditional British chickens. I'm not going to talk about the chickens that are actually on the attraction yet, but let's talk about the 3 most traditional British chickens that people would actually grow on farms. The first one, which in our picture is going to be on the right-hand side, is the Sussex fowl, which is a British breed that dates all the way back to 1845, also known as Kent fowls. You could have speckled Sussex, which have a tricolor, which you see here on the right-hand side. And others include the buff, which has a gingery colored body, the light, which has a white body and a black neck, and the silver with which is all black with silver lacing. I had no idea that there were so many different varietals of chickens and that each varietal had all these different colors. Very, very, very interesting. Next chicken, which we're going to go all the way to the left-hand side, is called a Dorking fowl. The Dorking fowl, which could be all black or silver and gray, were very similar to the males, had much longer, slightly tipped feathers, and they were a 5-toed traditional chicken breed.
Well, how many toes do the other ones have?
I don't know, dude. There's so many toes. Look, the other ones look like they have 4. I think that one has more. I think 4 toes is normal, and 5 might be like just the way that one is.
The one in Mr. Toad, they look like they have 4.
Okay.
But they have like
and
3
then
and then like a little like thumb toe.
Oh, right. It's in the back. It's in the back part is the little thumb toe, as you call it. And then the last one was developed by William Cook of Orpington, Kent. And that is the Orpington fowl. And they surfaced around 1866. They had 4 standard coloreds, but the normal one was the buff or ginger variety, which you see here. So again, these were all viewed as the most common egg-laying chicken breeds that you would find in England. However, the chicken breed that we actually see is this guy. Tell me they don't look like the actual chicken from Mr. Toad.
Yeah.
And what we're looking at is a white standard Old English game fowl. And it was occasionally would be used as for meat, but most of the times not. These chickens were actually used for gambling. So cockfighting mainly.
Oh, sad.
So they were kept dominantly for ancient fighting breeds in England, but had been used all the way back to Roman times. And they were standardized in England as the game hen, the fighting game hen in the 1800s. So they were typically very poor commercial egg layers, but they made excellent broody hens and mothers. So roosters were known for their territorial protective behavior. They were upright with a proud stance, broad chest, muscular build, tight, hard feathering that lies close to the body with a white plumage that was pure and clean, yellow legs, and then that red face, comb, and wattles in earlobes. Very fierce, alert expressions with bright eyes. So these were, they would eat them, but it was mainly bred for fighting.
So why would they have all of this one kind of chicken that's not even a good egg layer?
I mean,
like
honestly...
like a fighting ring on the side? Like, what's going on here on Mr. Toad's farm?
Well, what kind of freaks me out a little bit more, too, is that I feel like we've seen these chickens before in other ways, but in a non-traditional way that makes... Hang on. I gotta do it like this, because this is ridiculous. I have to show it. Do you know where this chicken is from, Kate?
This is the Muppets, right?
It's Gonzo's chicken. So I think Gonzo has
Camilla?
a white standard old English game fowl as its chicken.
She's not a good layer, Gonzo.
No.
The fights they
But
must have.
yeah, that's Camilla the chicken. So yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
So in our chat, and Jordan's also saying something that I was thinking too. It was, what kind of chickens are those? They're identical to the Pirates ones. And I'm like,
oh, interesting.
Could you possibly pull up a photo from Pirates of the Caribbean? Because they do. I think this is like Disney's standard chicken. When they need a chicken, this is the kind they're going to use. This is the chicken to beat all chickens. This is one you know is a chicken when you see it. Visual economy.
It's a terrible picture of it, but yeah.
So in Pirates of the Caribbean, when they were making it, all of those little audio animatronics, right, they try to save as much money as possible. So they try to like duplicate things, right? We see that with the audio animatronics, like they just change some of their facial hair or expressions or whatever, but like they're like the same person. You know, we saw that with Beacon Joe is a famous one. So he's like the king in the Haunted Mansion plus the pirate at the end of Pirates of the Caribbean plus Beacon Joe, who's, you know, he's in Alligator Bayou in around the rivers of America in Walt Disney World, and he's also in the front of Pirates of the Caribbean. Anyway, he's everywhere, right? That's the point. So they did the same thing here with chickens, and they made all of the chickens identical. So, which actually Blaine Gibson, who was the sculptor for Pirates of the Caribbean, grew up on a farm, and he was so mad about this because he was like, "There's no way that all these chickens would be identical. They would." You know, they are going to look different from each other. Even if they're the same breed, they're all going to be like, they're going to look different because no two chickens are exactly the same. So the chickens in Pirates of the Caribbean are all identical and look like these chickens from Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. But Blaine Gibson was pretty upset about that.
The other last just connection is here's in Living with the Land. Again, similar chicken situation going on here.
Which is also probably the exact same audio animatronic as Pirates of the Caribbean, and they just duplicated them, which is what the dog actually in Living with the Land is the same one as Pirates of the Caribbean. They just kind of put different fur on him. So they're all the same.
That would make sense.
Yeah, and Carousel of Progress, same dog as well, just different fur. Anyway, that's fun.
Chicken talk.
Yeah. Man, that was fun. Well, I think now that's probably a good place for us to pause before we move forward and go into the rest here, which I think our next episode is going to go pretty quickly because a lot of things we've already talked about before with Town Square and whatnot. I think that pretty much wraps up this episode. Kirk, do you have any final thoughts here as we wrap up?
They're lying to you about the chickens they use.
They had pens in Mr. Toad's era. They didn't need quills. And 2 words, right? Anachronistic and panache. Those are your Distory
Anachronistic
words.
and panache.
Mm-hmm.
I will use anachronistic for the rest of my life.
Yeah, we're going to use it a lot in this series. So it'd be great.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us for Distory. We hope you enjoyed the first part of Track B for Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, and we will see you next time for more of Distory.